Amara was still holding the serving tray when Chisom said it. Loud enough for the whole table to hear. Loud enough for the room to go still. "This is what my son married. A woman who cleans other people's floors." 7 months pregnant, Amara did not flinch. She had been waiting for this moment longer than any of them knew. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe. You need this story. There is a kind of woman the world never sees coming. Not because she hides, but because the world has already decided what she is, and once that decision is made, people stop looking closely enough to notice anything else. Amara Obi had understood this since she was 9 years old. Her mother, Ngozi, had run a small provisions shop in Enugu with the discipline of someone managing a corporation. Every kobo tracked, every supplier relationship cultivated with patience. Every reinvestment made before comfort was considered. Ngozi never finished secondary school, but she understood something that men with MBA frames on their walls often missed: that the person who controls the supply chain controls everything, and the person who controls everything should never announce it too early. She died when Amara was 24. She left her daughter a shop, a leather journal, and a philosophy sharp enough to cut glass. "Build in silence," the journal read on the first page. "Let them celebrate while you construct. The reveal is not for their entertainment. It is for your protection." Amara had read that line so many times the ink had faded slightly at the edges. She met Tabena at 28. He was everything that looked like a future. Tall, articulate, ambitious in the specific way that reads as security before it curdles into arrogance. He brought her hibiscus tea the first time they met at a mutual friend's gathering. He asked about her work. He listened. He called the next morning. She fell in love with the version of him that existed before success confirmed his worst suspicions about his own importance. They married at 30. By then, she had already been quietly acquiring commercial real estate under Nzuri Holdings, a company registered in her mother's maiden name, invisible across every public document. The acquisition portfolio had crossed 180 billion Nigerian nairas the year before the wedding. Tabena did not know. She had not told him, not out of deception, but out of the precise wisdom her mother had planted in her years before. Build before you need to. Protect before you are attacked. When they moved to Lagos, Tabena's career at Vantage Crown Properties accelerated. He became regional director at 34. The suits improved. The invitations arrived. His mother, Chisom, began calling more frequently, her voice carrying the particular warmth of a woman whose son had become something she could use at dinner parties. Amara took a position as a janitor at Vantage Crown Properties 6 months after they relocated. Not because she needed the income, because invisible women see everything. She mopped the floors. She cleaned the executive washrooms. She listened. She learned the internal fault lines of the company, which board members were dissatisfied, which acquisitions were underfunded, which director was quietly looking for an exit. She pressed her employee badge to scanners, greeted security guards by name, and absorbed every structural weakness of the company her husband believed he was building a legacy inside. 3 months before this dinner, she had completed the acquisition of Vantage Crown Properties through Nzuri Holdings. Tabena was now, without knowing it, her employee. The dinner had been Chisom's idea. A family gathering at their home, 12 people around a table, the kind of evening Tabena's family used for 2 things: celebrating and establishing hierarchy. Amara had cooked for 3 hours. She had set the table herself. She had worn a simple dress that stretched gently over her 7-month belly and moved through the evening with the unhurried patience of a woman who already knew how the night would end. She was refilling the pepper soup from the kitchen when she heard Chesum's voice rise. She carried the tray back to the table anyway. And that was when it happened. Chisholm gestured toward her with the loose confidence of a woman who had never once been made to account for her words. "This is what my son married," she said, her eyes moving from Amara's uniform. She had come straight from a shift, to her stomach, to the tray in her hands. A woman who cleans other people's floors. 7 months gone and still mopping. Tabena, is this the legacy you want for your child? The table went quiet. Remy stared at her plate. Tabena said nothing. He said nothing. Amara set the tray down slowly. She looked at her husband's face, searching for the man who had asked about her work, who had listened, who had called the next morning, and found only the polished stillness of a man calculating the cost of defending her against the cost of his mother's approval. He chose wrong. She picked up her phone from the counter. She sent one message to Mr. Falad. 4 words. Move everything to tomorrow. Because what none of them sitting at that table understood was that tomorrow, the building Tabena walked into each morning, the company his mother boasted about at church, the legacy he believed he was constructing, all of it already had a different owner. And she was standing in front of them, holding a serving tray, waiting for the moment to stop being patient. That moment had just arrived, Mr. Falade replied in under 2 minutes. Confirmed. Board notification at 7 a.m. Full restructuring disclosure by 9. Do you want the letter to come from you directly? She typed back without looking up from the counter. Yes, he needs to know it came from me. She returned to the table. She sat down. She ate her food. She asked Tabena's uncle about his health. She refilled Chesum's glass when it emptied, not from submission, but from the complete freedom of a woman who no longer needs the room's approval because she already owns the room. Chisholm interpreted the silence as shame. She always did. She leaned toward the woman beside her, Tabena's aunt, and said, just low enough to be heard by everyone pretending not to listen, "A man like my son should have married ambition, not a mop." Tabena laughed, small, involuntary. The laugh of a man releasing pressure he should have redirected. Amara heard it. She placed her hand on her stomach. Her daughter moved, a sharp, insistent kick, and it felt like instruction. Remember this. After the guests left, Tabena found her in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes. He stood in the doorway with his jacket off, loosened tie, the particular posture of a man preparing to offer a partial apology, enough to feel like resolution, not enough to require any real accountability. "My mother speaks without thinking," he said. "You know how she is." Amara turned off the tap. She dried her hands on the kitchen towel with the deliberate patience of a woman choosing every word before it left her mouth. "I know exactly how she is," she said. "I also know how you are. You sat at that table for 11 seconds after she spoke. I counted. You chose silence." "Amara." "We will talk tomorrow," she said. "There are things you need to understand about our situation. Things I should have told you earlier. I was waiting for the right moment." She looked at him directly. "Your mother chose it for me." She walked to the bedroom. She did not cry. She had done her crying years ago, the private grief of a woman who marries a man's potential and watches it curdle slowly into something that requires documentation. She had grieved the marriage in increments, quietly, the way her mother had taught her to do everything that mattered. Now she sat on the edge of the bed and made 3 calls. The first was to her doctor, who confirmed her blood pressure was elevated and advised rest. The second was to Mr. Falad, who walked her through the morning's sequence with the calm efficiency of a man who had spent 4 years building something precise. The third call she did not make with her voice. It was a transfer authorization, moving the final tranche of Nzuri Holdings' Vantage Crown acquisition into the active disclosure file, ready for the board by morning. She lay down at midnight with her hand on her stomach. "I built something for you," she whispered to the daughter, who had not yet arrived. "Before you were here, I was already building. That is what women like us do." At 6:58 the following morning, Tabena dressed for work in the quiet of their bedroom, while Amara lay still with her eyes open, watching the ceiling. He straightened his tie in the mirror. He did not apologize again. He kissed her forehead in the distracted way of a man already mentally inside his workday. "We'll talk tonight," he said. "You'll have other things to think about," she said softly. He smiled, the indulgent smile of a man who does not understand what is happening, and walked out of the door. His employee badge worked at the entrance. It would be the last time. At 703, the Nzuri Holdings restructuring notification landed in every Vantage Crown inbox simultaneously: board members, department heads, senior staff. At 7:47, a security officer met Tabena at the elevator with a sealed envelope and a professional expression that gave nothing away. "Mr. Tabena, there is a letter for you at the front desk, sir." The lobby did not go silent. It went careful, the specific atmosphere of colleagues who are watching something they will discuss for years, but will not acknowledge in real time. Tabena walked to the desk with the steady steps of a man whose legs have not yet received the message his brain is beginning to process. He opened the envelope. "Dear Mr. Tabena, effective immediately, your position as Regional Director at Vantage Crown Properties is terminated on grounds of conduct unbecoming a senior representative of this organization, specifically the public humiliation of the company's majority shareholder at a private family gathering on the evening of the 14th. Full documentation has been filed. The majority shareholder of Vantage Crown Properties, acquired through Nzuri Holdings, is your wife. Her name is Amara Obi." The letter left his hands. He stood at the front desk of the company he had given 11 years to. In the lobby he had walked through 1,000 times, believing it was his professional home, and understood for the first time that the ground beneath everything he had built had always belonged to someone else. To her. The woman he had let his mother humiliate while he sat at the table and counted the cost of speaking up, and chose silence instead. He had chosen wrong. Amara was not at Vantage Crown when the letter reached him. She was at the hospital because her doctor had called at 6:30 that morning, reviewed the previous night's blood pressure reading, and asked her to come in for monitoring. She had gone without telling Tabena. She sat in the examination room with her hand on her stomach while the machine traced her daughter's heartbeat across a narrow strip of paper. Steady, strong, certain of itself in the way only the unborn can be. The doctor confirmed everything was stable, elevated but manageable. Rest, hydration, reduced stress. Reduced stress. She almost smiled. Mr. Falad arrived at the hospital at 9:15. He sat across from her in the waiting area and placed a slim folder on the seat beside her. Divorce petition, restraining documentation, and the full Nuri Holdings financial disclosure. 31 pages, every acquisition, every subsidiary, every portfolio built across 9 years of deliberate, unannounced construction. "He'll want to contest," Mr. Faladay said. "He can try," Amara said. "Everything is documented, registered, and predates the marriage. There is nothing to contest." Mr. Falad nodded. "And the family?" She considered Chisholm's face at the table, the loose, unbothered cruelty of a woman who had never once imagined consequences. "Send the disclosure to the family group chat," she said. "All 31 pages. Let them read it together." Mr. Falad permitted himself the smallest expression, not quite a smile, not quite surprise, and wrote the instruction down. The family group chat received the document at 11:02 that morning. Remy, Tobena's younger sister, was the first to call. She had been the one sitting closest at the table the night before, the one who had stared at her plate instead of speaking, and that silence had followed her home. "Amara," she said when the call connected. Her voice was different, stripped of performance. "I am sorry. I should have said something. I knew it was wrong, and I said nothing." "I know," Amara said. "Is there anything?" "Take care of yourself, Remy," she said. "That is enough." She hung up softly. Tobena called 4 times. She did not answer. The 5th time, she picked up and said only, "Everything you need to know is in the document. Your lawyer will receive the formal papers by end of day. Do not contact me outside of legal correspondence." Then she ended the call before he could find words, because she had learned long ago that certain conversations are not for understanding, they are for closing. Chisom did not call. 3 months later, Amara sat in the chairman's office at Vantage Crown Properties, repainted the deep ochre she had chosen herself, her daughter asleep in the bassinet beside the desk, reviewing quarterly acquisition reports with the focused attention of a woman who has spent her whole life preparing for exactly this seat. The room smelled like fresh paint and possibility. On her desk, beside the market report, sat her mother's leather journal, open to the first page. The ink faded at the edges, the words still sharp. "Build in silence. Let them celebrate while you construct." She looked at her daughter, small face, steady breathing, entirely unaware of what her mother had already arranged for her future, and felt the specific peace of a woman who kept every promise she made to herself. Tobena was navigating legal proceedings from a service department across the city. Chisom had stopped attending her church women's fellowship after the document circulated, and the table where a woman had been humiliated for holding a serving tray was now a story people in that family whispered about, not as gossip, but as warning. Here is what this story teaches. It is not about wealth. The money was never the point. The point is what Amara did with every moment she was being underestimated. She did not perform strength. She did not announce herself. She absorbed every dismissal as data, every cruelty as coordinates, and every silence she was forced to swallow became a brick in something they could never take from her. The people who humiliate you in public have already told you who they are. Believe them, document it, and build in silence until the moment arrives when the truth needs no introduction, because it already owns the building. Dignity is not given. It is constructed, quietly, over years, in the hands of a woman who never stopped working, even when no one was watching, especially then. Amara walked through that door. She took her daughter with her. She never looked back. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe for stories that see you, remind you of your power, and prove that the most dangerous woman in any room is the one they forgot to watch.